In 1605, Englishmen did not discover Saint Lucia. They arrived broken, hungry, and armed. The island already had names, paths, gardens, leaders, and rules. And when strangers stepped onto its shores, carrying weapons, fear, and ambition, the island answered. This is not a story of savagery or heroism. It is a story of first contact under the worst possible condition. Events unfolded in the south of Saint Lucia, around Vieux Fort, Mola Chic, and Point Sab. This coastline was not unknown land. It was Kalinago territory, shaped by generations who understood its reefs, rivers, and escape routes. When the ship anchored off Saint Lucia, canoes approached almost immediately. The Kalinago people came not with threats, but with food: tobacco, plantain, cassava, and turtles. To the starving English, this felt miraculous. But for the Kalinago, this was not charity, it was assessment. Who were the strangers? How long would they stay? And what did they want? Trade began, but trade was not submission. It was a test. 67 Englishmen made a decision that would change everything. They chose not to leave. They built huts near fresh water and fenced themselves in. Each man carried a musket. A cannon was dragged ashore. To the English, this was survival. But to the Kalinago, this was a warning sign. Saint Lucia was not an unclaimed island. It was part of a wider Kalinago world, connected by sea routes, kinship, and memory. Europeans had come before, and they really stayed small. A fragile coexistence took shape along the banks of the Vieux Fort River. The English settlement stood close to a Kalinago village led by Chief Anthony. Anthony was no stranger to Europeans. He had once been enslaved in Margarita and spoke some Spanish. Houses were purchased with hatchets and knives. Meals were shared. Peace existed, but it was delicate. For weeks, the uneasy peace held. Food was traded daily, meals were shared. The Englishmen marveled at the gardens heavy with cassava, tobacco, and fruit. At night, they fished and cooked together. But beneath the surface, suspicion grew. The Kalinago's leaders watched carefully. Who controlled the weapons? Who ignored boundaries? The peace existed, but trust never fully formed. The balance shattered with the arrival of Ogomat, Anthony's brother from St. Vincent. According to Anthony, Ogomat was furious that the English occupied the river huts. He warned the settlers that his brother planned their deaths and urged them to kill Ogomat first. But Ogomat told a different story. He befriended the English, he taught them how to make tools, and he warned them that Anthony was the traitor. Nicol wrote, "This made us doubtful which to trust to. Suspicion replaced certainty. Two critical mistakes sealed their fate. First, an Englishman sold a sword to Chief Anthony, violating strict orders never to arm the Kalinago. When Captain St. John's forcibly reclaimed it, Anthony was driven into a great rage. Trust collapsed. Then came gold. Master Brown identified gold in the arm plates worn by the Kalinago men. When the mountains where they were located were pointed out, 16 Englishmen left on a gold expedition. They never returned. Silence followed, and silence, in a world of rumor, breeds fear. Nicol suspected a trap. As food vanished, the English clung to comfort. Ogomat returned with roasted land crabs. The Kalinago were invited inside the camp. Songs were sung, agua vitae flowed. Amid the noise, an Englishman overheard a chilling warning. The gold seekers had their throats cut off at the mouth. The English then realized that they had over 100 unarmed Kalinago inside their camp. They debated slaughtering them. Master Tench, however, objected, saying, God would not approve of such a bloody act against harmless people. The conspiracy was abandoned. By morning, the opportunity and their safety was gone. Days later, 18 Englishmen followed Ogomat toward Point Sam, lured by the promise of hammocks. The heat was extreme. The boots sank into soft sand. Though armed, the muskets were unloaded and the cannons unlit. One Englishman joked arm in arm with 2 Kalinago men. He did not see the trap that was forming. At Point Sam, the land narrowed, bush closed in, and the Kalinago capitalized. At a narrow point of the land, surrounded by water and bush, the trap was sprung. Ogomat embraced an Englishman, then seized his weapon. His father struck the Englishman down with his brass sword. Arrows exploded from the forest, thick, precise, and relentless. Englishmen ran into the sea, only to be shot and drowned. Names were called out as men fell. This was not chaos, it was coordination. The Kalinago were not improvising, they were removing a threat. The English could not return fire. They were too busy pulling arrows from their bodies. Only 5 or 6 shots were fired. While some men drowned, others had their feet nailed to the ground by arrows. Master Tench was killed as he tried to stand. Nickel charged Chief Anthony. Anthony fired an arrow that nailed Nickel's hand to his sword. Still, Nickel forced him back and fled. He swam a great lake and waded through mud up to his waist, pursued by shouts of triumph. Nickel returned to the settlement. For 3 days, the survivors held out behind the cannon. When powder ran dry, they fired stones. Burning arrows rained down from land and sea. Starving and wounded, 19 men traded their remaining tools for a truce and 1 canoe. Anthony warned that Ogomat would return with 12 canoe loads of warriors. Shortly after midnight, they fled. No compass or garters for rigging. The first English attempt to settle the Caribbean ended in silence. The gold seekers vanished. Most were killed. Saint Lucia remained strongly Kalinago territory. The survivors drifted to Venezuela, where few lived long. It would be years before the English tried again.